Yeah, before I start, I would just like to say that if you make a POI, try to not make it verbal. Just raise your hand or stand up or like wave at me. That'll be great. We live in a world where people are pressured to go outside to do in-person activities like clubbing or like engaging in like romantic or sexual activities, right? Recognize that we have, not everyone is like extroverted, not everyone enjoy these activities, not everyone have the capacity to engage in these activities, and also like we live in a lottery of birth where how much money you have or like how much your personality of being introverted or extroverted is totally out, it's like really out of your control, right? And in status quo, you don't really have the choice because you're socially pressured to do it in person and online. If you don't go outside, if you don't engage in these activities, in-person activities like sports or like clubbing or like other kind of in-person interaction, you're being called as like, oh, like a weeb or like homebody, or like if you engage in these kind of like online activities, online interests, you are being laughed at, right? How do we, so we support the trend of like staying at home because like we believe that, firstly I would like to talk about why in-person activities still exist and it's still going to be prevalent, right? The choice of like engaging in in-person activities like sports will still exist because like you have like schools and work which is predominantly in person. Most of these education and like employment is only in person, and you would be forced to like, you'll be encouraged to like do sports, or you'll be encouraged to like talk to each other, talk to your classmates when you're at school. You'll be encouraged to like engage in like work socials, etc. Right? Most of the interests, most of the hobbies in the world like are in person and predominantly in person, like sports or like other kind of interests that cannot really be done online. Right? You cannot really go hiking online, for example. And I think humans naturally do, to some extent, crave like face-to-face interaction. That if they want face-to-face interaction and they choose to, they will still be able to access this. Right? The difference here is that some people genuinely prefer and thrive in like at home, and like when they stay at home, they're more likely to like engage in communities online instead, right? So why is that the case, right? Because some people just don't have like the monetary capacity to actually engage in these in-person activities, right? If you have to travel to like do like a sports where you probably have to like pay for like your transport, it's not free. Where these in-person activities predominantly are activities where you have to pay for it, right? There's like, if you have to like play football, you probably have to like book the course or like etc. You have to like engage in like, if you have to go clubbing, you have to like pay for like the entry fees, etc. Right? A lot of people just don't have the monetary capacity to do these things, right? Additionally, a lot of people have the caring responsibilities, right? They have to care for like your siblings or like their elderly parents, etc. That they can't really go in person often. They can't really spend a lot of time to do it because they probably are constantly have to like watch someone, meaning that they can only engage in activity maybe like 30 minutes, like every other 30 minutes they can like engage in activity. They can do that online by like playing games or like talking to people online, but they can't really do that when they have to engage in an in-person activity where they have to leave the house, right? Additional to that, some people just have like disabilities which make them more difficult to engage in like in-person activities where a lot of venues are not accessible, right? Also, a lot of people are introverted by nature. I think it's something that is very difficult for you to control of because personality is quite like genetic that you can't really just like control it, right? Or like you can't really control the fact that you prefer to be online, or you're feeling a little bit shy, or like you just have niche interests that like are predominantly online, like gaming or like anime, etc. These people are going to prefer online communities regardless, right? And why stay-at-home trend is the unique mechanism for these people to engage in these activities, right? Recognize that social pressure exists and is prevalent, right? Regardless of whether the pressure comes from online or in person, humans are naturally social creatures because we are biologically primed to be social, so that because we rely on each other to survive, right? Therefore, like we're biologically primed to be like social, where we care about how other people think about us, right? When other people laugh at you for staying at home, say calling you like homebody or calling you like a shy person, you're some shy person, is something that you don't want to be called, and you don't want to be seen as someone who's like less good than others. Yeah, I'll take you.
Irrespective of whether people go out, people who experience social anxiety, people who engage in nerd culture, are they likely to still be called out or bullied for traits that are just generally society unacceptable anyway?
I think they are far more likely to be called out when stay at home is not a trend, right? Because when it's a trend, it means that like it's something that a lot of like more and more people engage in, right? I think there's a difference between like having like if only like 1% of people engaging in this and like 40% of people engaging in it, even if it's not like the majority, right? When a lot of people, when this trend exists, it's likely that there's a trendsetter. There's probably like influencers who are saying that, oh, I like staying at home and staying at home is totally fine. So there will be more communities that legitimize like staying at home, right? This like connect to like my second point about like how like when there is a stay-at-home trend, it means that more people feel okay to be staying at home. There'll likely be like more online communities, more thriving online communities that are surrounding around like staying at home, right? Because when this trend exists, it's likely to like be happening on social media, where like there's probably TikToks about like how I like to stay at home and it's totally fine to stay at home. Meaning more people will engage in these communities, engage in these things. But if more people are going to stay at home, they probably would still naturally crave social interaction, which means they would go online, which means that they would actually like more people would be talking online, more people will be more like like groups, more discussion forums, etc., more like videos or like images being created online, which means that like even if you have a niche interest where only a few people are interested in that thing, like a particular show, for example, you have more people engaging online, meaning that by numbers you are more likely to find someone who will have the same interest, and you're more likely to have a thriving community when you have like 10,000 people who are interested in that, who is talking about that online, instead of just having like 10 people who are talking about it, right? So you make much better online communities in the first place, that these people will be able to engage in far more better, right? I think the reason why this social pressure is so important is because like people really care about like how other people feel about them. When you have bigger social online communities where there's more people actually have the same interest or like the same way that you're staying at home with you, then you feel like that's more okay and you feel more confident. Often if you're like shy, the first step for you is not to go in person and to talk to someone where you probably are seen as socially awkward and being bullied, right? If you're able to build up your social skills by starting online, which is still in the interaction with a human, just like through like maybe a video or like through like text, you're able to build up the social skills, you're able to feel validated. Before I take a POI from closing.
If people are like pushed by places such as school and work to actually still socialise in person, how do you actually change anything if these really important elements of your life are still encouraging you to socialise in person?
I think it changes because people have free time, right? People don't spend 24/7 working, and it's true that like you probably will still be encouraged to socialize at work, or like in education, which is enough to build up your social skills. But when you go home, you feel legitimized to like stay at home and play games instead of like playing football, or you feel legitimized doing that, right? I think this is a crucial difference, because like if you're like a shy person who is bullied at home, like bullied at school or at work, and you're able to find your niche online, you're able to like build up your confidence. You feel that someone is similar to you. You feel that you're okay. I think when you're able to find friends, even if it's an online friend, then like you're like to feel more confident about yourself. You have someone to talk to when you're like upset or down. That like you probably one day will meet in person, and one day will actually engage in in-person interaction. That I think the first thing that we need to care about these people who are more introverted, who are unable to access in-person interaction, because it's a replacement for them, right? People who prefer online in-person interaction is that they will still engage in in-person interaction. I think we normalize introvertedness. I think we normalize not being able to like go in person and engage in these in-person activities, which is really crucial to a vast majority of group of people, right? Maybe only a few people are actually like have niche interests, but if you combine all these people who don't have the money, who don't have the personality, who don't have the physical capacity, who don't have the time, then it's a lot. Thank you.
No idea this is actually streaming or not, but it's kind of creepy. Sorry, my phone is a bit slow, so it takes me time to get time. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. Online, people portray themselves in an unrealistic standard, a standard that other people often feel hard to live up to, and it makes them feel worse. At the same time, it is often hard to form deep, meaningful relationships online and to learn the social skills that you need for out life through things such as the workplace. A few things then in this speech, but firstly I want to start a rebuttal to opening government, because they make a claim that certain groups will feel better when there's a trend to staying at home. I'd like to point out first that our case will not just apply to minority groups, it will apply to everyone in the society as a whole, and say this trend is bad for everyone because they're going out less and they're staying at home more, and staying at home and looking on the internet is a bad thing. But secondly, most of those groups actually can just be rebutted fairly easily. Firstly, when it comes to pay, most people form relationships with people in the same socio-economic background as them, and in part this is so they can actually socialise easily. That is, teenagers often meet on the park and drink on the park or do something like that because it's relatively cheap to do. Secondly, when it comes to single parents or parents who can't get out, I grew up in a single parent family. What actually happens is you just meet other parents and do something with a kid together, because that is the thing that you can do with your children. Thirdly, when they talk about disabled people, I don't think these are in the debate, because nobody shames disabled people for staying at home, because most people would feel awful at bullying and shaming a disabled person for staying at home. Fourthly then, when they talk about like shy people in general, this is probably the most broadest claim they do, but I'd point out that there's an increasing awareness of things such as bullying. There's an increasing awareness of things such as introvertedness. Most people here have probably done a Myers-Briggs test at some point in their life and understand understand when they portray themselves online. They post the best looking images of them online. They post images and stories of themselves doing fun and exciting things at their very best online. Note, this is different to in person where you see somebody in a realistic way. One, you see what they realistically look like visually, but also, secondly, often you see that lots of time they don't eat those nice food that they post online, but they eat average food like everyone else, or they actually just do average things on a night out that you're having with them and don't do all the exciting things that often people portray themselves to doing online. Why is this a good thing? It's a good thing because it gives you realistic expectations. It gives you expectations of actually what most people's lives look like in society. When you're spending more time online and looking more online at how people and seeing the way that people portray themselves, you think that people have a better life than you. You think that everyone is living a really exciting life in the way that they portray themselves online. This makes yourself feel like you have an inferior life because you're not living it up to them. And if anything, it just creates a positive feedback cycle. Therefore, you feel more pressure to portray yourself as living an extremely nice life online, which just like increases the standard, creates positive feedback, and makes everything worse. I'll take the POI now from closing.
We're not talking about scrolling Instagram all day, but we're talking about like special interest groups, for example, I don't know, pen paper RPGs, gaming or whatever, where you talk for hours and get to know the people.
Okay, that is your best case on your side of the house. I don't think most people, you know, you're staying behind the status quo, and I don't think that when most people stay at home nowadays, they actually spend most of the time on gaming groups. But to the extent they do, lots of this analysis still applies, because when you follow these gamers that you meet online, on social media, on Instagram, because you become maybe slightly better friends with them, they still portray themselves in an unrealistic way on Instagram. Whilst when you meet your friend from a football club, for example, in real life, you probably go to the pub with him after and realize that his life actually isn't very exciting. Okay. Second thing in this speech is you actually just form deeper, meaningful relationships with people. And this applies to the people you meet online in gaming forums, if that's what closing government want to talk to you about. And there's three reasons that I have for this. But the first one is probably the most important. The first one is you just have greater choice online to choose between different people. It is very easy to meet new people because there's huge amounts of people on these Discord servers that closing government wants to talk to you about. There's huge numbers of people online, and you feel there's a low barrier to meeting these individuals because you probably met these individuals fairly easily through some messages that you sent on one of these servers that closing government is talking to you about. The important thing is that relationships require a lot of work. Often they require a lot of work maybe when you disagree on things and you start to argue and you have to come to some sort of regulatory decision, or when you want to make a relationship deeper and talk about personal issues because you have to take on an emotional burden from the other person. Note, you are less likely to want to put in the effort to do those things when you feel you could just meet other people relatively easily. So instead of putting in the effort to do those things, you just meet other people instead. What this means is, A, you form less good ability to actually reconcile with other people when you agreements because you don't reconcile with them, you just meet other people online instead. But B, you often don't form deep and meaningful relationships where you could talk about personal issues and get advice because of the fact often people just get scared off because they know it's hard and an emotional burden on themselves to have this conversation with you, so they just blank you online and talk to other people instead when you want to talk to them. No more POIs, I've already given you your POI. Secondly though as well, you have less relatable experiences. Yes, okay, maybe you spend some time gaming with these individuals online, but you don't have the same like level of contact which you would with an in-person, like a person in person. You don't have those, you may have a conversation about gaming, but you don't visually see them as much. You don't interact in the same way. There isn't physical touch. I think as your opening has already conceded, we've evolved in an environment where people were very face-to-face. What this means is we've evolved to be able to read other people's faces in extreme detail, those small little expressions that they make. At the same time, human touch is something that's very powerful to us and we interpret very deeply. The issue is when we only meet people online, we don't learn how to understand these things and we don't learn how to interpret these things. There's two issues to this then. One, we often don't learn how to interpret these things and often we don't know how to use them themselves to deepen our relationships with other people. Worse, this can even lead to inappropriate touching, etc. I won't go into that for equity reasons. But secondly, it also often means that you just can't form as deep relationships with people. You don't have those shared experiences to relate to people over at a later date, or at least those experiences aren't as deep or as meaningful because you only had them online on a COD forum and not actually, for example, spending absolute hours on hours with this person, actually sharing these deep experiences, seeing their faces, hearing their expressions, seeing tones of voice that often microphones don't portray. What this means is you just don't get as deep relationships. It's hard to surmount the barrier I talked about earlier. It's hard to start having personal conversations with these people. I've been on gaming forums myself. It's hard to get to the point of friendship where you can talk talk about a personal issue with these people for these reasons than it is compared to like a person in your football club or a person you know in real life. This means you don't form as good friendships, you can't get advice from these people in the future, you can't get actual emotional fulfillment that makes you happy in the same deep and meaningful way. It also just simply means that you don't get these relatable friendships that last with you for life. I think it's debate that simply gives people on our side of the house better and more meaningful friendships and better mental health and realistic expectations. Vote opening opposition.
Okay. Starting 3, 2, 1. Note that the unique contribution of our case is that unlike on their side of how what's happening in the status quo right now is that there does not exist a space for these people to be able to opt into and have that kind of agency, and we think that they deserve that agency. The important thing is that most of these connections, who you choose to be friends with, are kind of symmetric based on your personality and who you interact with in the first place. Whereas what we uniquely give you is that we provide a space where they can actively opt into and basically and can actively opt into and feel safe and still have a sense of affiliation. They gave us a couple of responses. Their first responses is that their thing doesn't only apply to minority groups. Note that we gave you a lot of different groups. They're not just minority. There's a plethora of different types of groups, but note that also people who, it's not just people who have an introverted personality, but also people who sometimes just prefer to stay at home a little bit and not to put yourself in uncomfortable social situations and instead feel like you're being left out or get like FOMO or something. Like basically feel of being missing out or feeling like you're missing something or losing that kind of sense of affiliation that you otherwise would not lose in the first place. We don't think this applies to minority groups, whereas we think that this applies to majority groups. This affects more uniquely to certain minority groups, which if you add them together is a lot, but also it also generally applies to a lot of different people. For example, just like even a normal extrovert would sometimes want to stay at home and not want to feel socially punished or mentally punished for that kind of agency. We think that we provide that space. It's not in no way just applicable to minority groups. They also gave independent response to like how other different groups of people can like still have some sort of choice and interaction normally. We think that these are just independent responses. It's always better to give them a lot more choice, given that they have like generally a quite big limitations on the kind of social interactions they get. That kind of online interaction is unique, and that like it is big and like crucially important to give them more of a space to interact with them. Okay, moving on. So we think that their biggest case is, first of all, their first case is how they can see people in a realistic way and give them realistic expectations. Not to mention that this is kind of like, we think that, first off, we don't think that like people who are just like introverted, well, people who are extroverted will still go out in the first place. But also note that I think in a lot of social media spaces, given that you already see people who are extroverts and etc., I think as an introvert, when you see these kind of like Instagram stories or whatever, you already have that kind of like unrealistic expectations. We think that this is kind of symmetric, but not to mention the more important response is that you are not friends with celebrities, okay? We are not always friends with influencers. In fact, most of our friends are people we see in our daily lives, people you automatically connect with because of like personality, economic, whatever factors there are, which means that a lot of people you meet or interact with, even online or in person, are the kind of people that are normal, not people who are hyper influencer, crazy stories, etc. Their stories are not going to be that as crazy or as like what do you call it, fantastical, or as like that kind of crazy extroverted as they claim to be, and also that you're not friends with like usually I assume most people aren't friends with influencers or celebrities, but also you're probably friends with people who are similar to yourself. So whether you're like looking at their stories, you probably won't feel that kind of like idea, but also even if you meet them in person, that kind of realistic expectation benefits that you get from them is like relatively low in the first place. But the second and more important case is that how you can form deeper meaning with people. First of all, we just think that their characterization that you can only form deeper meaning with people when you meet them in person is just incorrect, in the sense that how do their own characterizations that you form deeper meaning with people when you have deeper conversations. We think that online communities also provide that kind of space, especially when your friends and family do not give you access to that kind of communication that you otherwise have, like LGBT or people with like I don't know, disability, anything. People who feel like it's much better to talk to a stranger online, or people who share niche interests with you, people who share the same kind of mentality, people who are probably across the globe, especially when you have that kind of niche interest and niche personality, etc. That we think that you get to engage in more deeper conversations, especially that like based on just amount of interaction. We think that if you keep going to, like keep gaming, set up a time to like game together, etc. We think that that also forms that kind of social interactions. But even the kind of texting or the kind of like sharing you give to a stranger that you probably would never know you is probably deeper and more meaningful in certain ways. We think that there are multiple communities and multiple friendships that are formed that are very deep and probably deeper than in-person connections. Not to mention that if you claim to that kind of like amount of like interactions or going out all of the time, it actually depreciates the value of in-person connection. Whereas if you meet people online and you choose to meet them in person, that kind of connection is much deeper because you already have formed some of connection instead of like always going out all of the time. And instead you can still meet other friends if you go out all the time. We think that that's also symmetric. I will take one from closing.
If 50% less people start going to a club, do you think the club can stay open?
I'm not sure how that's relevant, because I feel like even if there's a stay-at-home trend, I feel like there are still a lot of people who would want to go to clubs. There are a few people who want to go to clubs, okay. I just think that's kind of irrelevant and a small delta in this debate. We think that the most important framing that we give you is this connection between social media and our identity. Note that in today's world, the kind of social media that are crushing your identity, the kind of like interactions you have, all the communications you have with your friends and family, etc. Also, all the places you get your education from, the amount of time you spend on social media is symmetric in this debate. We think that it is like very consistent, and the kind of identity you build, the kind of sense of affiliation you have, what kind of things your peers like, what kind of things people from your generation like, people your age of like, or what kind of things you learn from the world, what kind of things you seek entertainment from, how do you build your identity. All of this is closely connected to social media in today's day and age. I don't think anyone is going to contest that. But also we think that this multiplies the scale of the problem, because the existing status quo is that this is a massive problem that is only uniquely dominated by the social narrative that people should always go, that flamboyant influencer style. We think that what we uniquely give you is a counter narrative that provides a space for people to opt into. Like, even if you get bullied at school, you still have that kind of community to give you that some sort of comfort, and know that your sense of affiliation isn't being denied in that state. We think that the agency is most important to these people, because sense of agency, sense of affiliation, my partner already told you, is how uniquely important to teenagers or just people's sense of self-esteem in the first place. But also, we uniquely give you that space to opt into, even if you cannot find it in real life societies, schools, etc., that are unlikely to change in the first place. The difference is the denial of identity, and still find that kind of like identification, still have that kind of affiliation, and counteract oppressor in the same place. Because the crucial delta, again, is that you do not currently have that space. That space is being crowded out by that kind of influencer lifestyle, that kind of extravagance, that kind of life forcing people to go out all the time. We need that space uniquely for people to opt into, and these kind of space isn't going to crush people who are extroverts and want to go out all the time, still have their space to opt into, whereas people who do not originally have that space, or maybe feeling like socially disadvantaged, or don't have that kind of sense of affiliation in person, in real life, in schools, they can find it now. Thank you.
Right. Starting in 3, 2, 1.
The internet is not a kind and friendly place, as OG would have you believe. It is inflammatory. You find people who are genuinely awful people. You have figures like Andrew Tate who tell you that women are shallow, that all they care about is your height or the amount of money that you have in your bank, or you have narratives that feminists are out to get you and not genuine people who actually try to make positive changes in the world. You have online trolls who make you feel like you'll never be accepted in society, who bash you for the unchangeable characteristics that OG themselves talk about. It is not always a friendly place. We think sometimes it can be nice, but we think there are a lot of bad things about the internet. There are a lot of unrealistic expectations, and we think doing things like going out is what moderates the worst parts of the internet, right? It reassures you that when you go out, you can be accepted, that not everyone is a troll who will make you feel unaccepted. You have people who don't actually always care about your height and don't just care about your hair color, but even when you're engaging in relationships, even if they're only a sexual nature, people in the real world care about a lot more than what you just look like, right? And don't just conform to the unrealistic expectations you believe people have online, right? We think that in-person experience and going out is what teaches you how the real world works. It's what moderates all of the worst kinds of things that happen on the internet. And I think this is the most important claim in the debate, because I think there are good things about the internet, as OG and probably CG will rightly point out as well, but I think there are also bad things, right? And I think the crucial thing about in-person interaction is it moderates the worst parts of the internet, the parts of the internet that can do the most damage to young people, right? And we think that is the valuable thing about in-person communication, right? And we think that the real world can be incredibly refreshing. It can remind you that the world isn't so bad. I want to quickly deal with this idea of peer pressure, and I think there are a variety of things I want to say here. Firstly, I think I'd contend that many of the things that you're pressured into doing to some extent aren't always bad, right? We think when people refuse to go out and socialize, when they refuse to go out and experience the world, when they refuse to engage in experiences that they don't potentially like, right? If you're a gamer, actually going out and trying new things that you don't always feel comfortable with, we think it's good that to some extent society pressures you to go out and try things that are new, right? And I'm going to talk about why a lot of these things are good for your personal development in the long run, but I just want to flag, right, that I think insofar as if people pressure you to do things that are good for you, that is not necessarily always a bad thing. But secondly, just because the motion side talks about alcohol and clubbing, that doesn't mean that's all of what this debate is about. When you go outside, there are many things that you can do other than just club or drink alcohol, right? I don't think that the only things that you have to do, you can go out to like a jazz bar, for example, where there isn't an expectation of you to get really drunk, for example, or also, I think there are just a variety of activities that people can do online. There's loads of different leisure centers, there's loads of different activities, there's loads of different people providing different experiences in the real world, there are loads of physical businesses that provide these things, and they have incentives to find different people of different interests and provide those in-person experiences. So there probably are going to be a lot of ways in which people can access their interests on both sides of the house. Thirdly, I think, again, due to a lot of the societal progress and stuff that Matt talks to you about, I think the peer pressure to act a certain way when you go out or to drink heavily, right, isn't the same as it used to be, right? The fact that we know a lot more about the damages of alcohol and young people are aware of that and don't pressure their friends to do that because they know that is bad, but also there's just general liberalization in society, which is that people know that it's bad to bully, people are not a lot more aware of the effects of mental health, and the way that they tell other people to go out is often done in a sensitive way. When you tell someone to go out with you, it's not, and someone doesn't want to go out with you, you don't tell them, oh, you're a nerd, you're an awful person. Instead, you appeal to their humanity, right? I like you as a friend, right? I want to experience this thing with you. Come out with me and try something new. I think that's the actual way in which this motion happens. That's how the trend activates. I don't think in a pernicious way as governments say it does. But also, I think, even though that they say there are genuinely some instances of people who find it hard to go out, I'd posit that apart from the minority of cases, and it is a minority, even if they can name a number of groups, each of those groups is quite small, like disabled people, for example, or people with access issues, I think the majority of people are people who can change. Even if they're introverts right now, I think our contention is that what going out allows you to do is it allows you to develop. It allows you to learn social skills, right? We think that social skills can be learned. You can experience social interactions and learn with them. You can, for example, some people need exposure to come out of their shells. I think people might be introverted now and might not going out now, but the wonderful thing about being a young person is it allows you to grow. It allows you to become more extroverted. It allows you to develop social skills. That means you won't always feel uncomfortable when you go out. And I think in-person activities are designed to appeal to the majority, and insofar as that is the case, I think most people will be able to access in-person experiences to some extent, and I don't think humans are as static or as simple as OG claim. So what do online interactions look like? I think firstly, in terms of how these things work, So you have things like social media and dating apps where firstly you have a lot of saturation, right? There's unlimited online free real estate, which means that you can have an unlimited number of posts, which means that there's a lot of competition to be quite extreme, or also to stand out by trying to portray yourself in a perfect way to get more attention. But also secondly, in order to drive engagement and to stand out in these sort of like saturated platforms, right? You need to be quite inflammatory. You need to say things that drive engagement, that gets people to comment. And the way you do that is not by presenting ideas that people always agree with, but it's stuff that's inflammatory, that gets them to actually comment, because you're never going to comment, right, if you agree with someone, or you're never going to argue with them. You're only going to engage insofar as it makes you angry. And to that extent, this is why you have so many trolls and so many inflammatory people online who make people feel bad, who make people feel like they're not welcome, right? I think that is why you get a very hostile environment online, and that is where you get the narratives, right? People like Andrew Tate who capitalize on this and make people feel like the world is unfair to them and makes them feel like they cannot be accepted in society. Before I talk about the impacts of that closing.
Okay. You said there are so many bad places on the internet, and we need these social interactions to moderate. Why isn't it enough to have like school or work or whatever? We still need to go out. Why doesn't
Because
it
the
moderate?
problem is, okay, first of all, in school, you're in a very limited circumstance, and also people are growing. The whole point is this debate is about young people who still haven't learned how the world works. Yes, school is an important part of how you develop, but young adults, right, when they go into university, are experiencing an entirely new amount of life, right? They don't have teachers who are overseeing them. They're going out for the first time. They have independence. To that extent, a lot of your opinions and a lot of your things can be shaped still by the things that you see online. School does some work to help that, but it isn't enough. We think people need to continue to have in-person interactions to confirm the good things in life, right? So what do we think in comparison in-person interactions allow you to do? It allows you to learn to compromise. It allows you to learn about people on a deeper level, but it also means that you can't hide behind a screen. To that extent, right, we don't want people to only find people who they're interested in, as OG say, right? We want people to find people who are different to them, because in the long term, when you go to work, you're going to have to learn to interact with people who are different to you, right? When you're interacting with people in life, you're going to have to learn to actually like speak to people who aren't like you. We think loads of people who are socially anxious and find that difficult never learn how to interact with other people and never learn those social skills because they stay online. For all of those reasons, so proud to oppose.
All right. First of all, we are talking about young people here. We're not necessarily talking about what people do all their lives. We're talking about what people do in their free time, in their teens, maybe up to their mid to late 20s. This means that these people aren't lost forever, if that's what opposition tries to claim. These people will still learn social skills, as we pointed out in our POI, at work, at school, at uni, because these places have an active interest in getting people the social skills that they actually need in their everyday life. We believe that this trend to stay at home is a remnant of COVID times, where people experienced what it meant to be at home rather than to club all day, and we trust people to know what they want. We believe that this leads to a better allocation of people to what their actual interests are. That helps especially those people who are most vulnerable in the in the world right now, and therefore, even if we say it is worse for the average person, because it's such a massive help for the people who are least advantaged in our society, it is overall a good thing to have. All right, we already talked in opening half about this inherent extrovert-introvert scale, where people fall on their different energy levels, that some people enjoy clubbing, some people enjoy these social risky activities, some people don't. And we believe that this is a spectrum, and what this trend does, it makes it socially acceptable for people to stay at home, thereby enabling more people who fall more in the middle of the spectrum to stay at home, to go on the internet to socialize, instead of to go out. If something becomes a trend, this means that more people know other people that do this, and more people are friends with other people who do this or who have done this in the past, and people are more open to talk about having spent the night at home instead of making a white lie up about when them being clubbing or something. This means that overall people accept more when other people stay at home. In a world where this trend exists, this is, I believe, the crucial mechanism as to why actually people don't already stay at home in our world, and why this trend is so important. Yes?
If people aren't pressured to sometimes put themselves in situations that are slightly uncomfortable in the short term, how are they ever supposed to grow in the long term?
We believe that this pressure can affect some people certainly in a positive way. These people will tend to associate this, having done this once, with a good experience because they've done this and it wasn't as bad as they thought, and therefore they'll engage with it. We believe those people exist in both worlds. We believe it's also very likely that people get invited to social occasions in our world, and that those people who like this experience will return and will keep going there, even if half the clubs go out of business because half the people choose not to go to the club anymore. There still will be enough clubs for the demand that is there. Therefore, people will have a great time. However, we believe that those people who have done this in the past once and had a negative experience are more likely to come in and to stay at home. This means that if the people have made negative experiences with being outside, with socializing with the people in their specific area, they are less likely to put themselves through this again. If people have free time and they decide what to do in their world, it is very likely that even if they had bad experiences in the past, they will go out and socialize again. Number one, this means that in this social event, there will now be more people who don't really want to be there, making the experience worse for the people that want to be there. Number two, it means that the people do something in the expectation that it will not be good for them. We believe this leads them to do actual risky behavior. What is this risky behavior? Well, this means that, for example, people start to drink at social occasions, and they drink not because they want to improve the fun they're having, but because they kind of want to fade away what's happening around them. We believe this leads to risky behavior. Also, if they have a lot of casual sexual encounters and they don't really feel comfortable doing that, it's way more likely that they will end up in a situation where they don't really feel comfortable with what they're doing, but they're doing it because they have this fear of missing out on sexual encounters. We believe that this also means that people that don't feel comfortable at all, that might struggle with neurodivergence, that might struggle with mental illness, that might struggle even with their physical body, go out more into these situations where this doesn't improve for them, and they are more likely to not seek help for the problems they might face in their everyday life. What happens in the alternative? In the alternative, more people that are in the spectrum in the middle stay at home. If you stay at home, you way more easily select your social circles, your socialization for people that actually match you. Note that the info slide talks about the socialization aspect of being online, not the endless doom scrolling on Instagram. This means that what we compare is people going on Discord servers and just chatting with people that have similar interests to them. We believe that to the extent where it is still possible in today's world, both in the online and the offline world, people will most likely engage in these long-form conversations more easily online if they struggle to do so offline than in the world of the opposition. This means that especially those people I talked about that struggle in their everyday life now have a way easier time to find people with similar problems to talk about these problems with. This means that they recognize that their own behavior, their own experience aren't like one-offs, aren't similar to them, and that there are strategies they can use in their everyday life to be helped. This means that those people that in their world are just forcing themselves to go into this risky behavior, that struggle, are the people that are helped in our world because they can adapt and turn to things that help them. All right. If we compare this impact to what the other teams give us, especially what happens to people who aren't pushed, we believe that for those people what is lost is time. eventually they will end up in a situation where they are invited to a social occasion, then they will discover that they do like it and will catch up. However, for the people in our world that are affected, there is no real alternative, because all of the situations in which they are forced to be damage them. They are damaging to their mental health, they might be damaging to their physical health, and because it is not accepted to go into the alternative, we believe that it's very unlikely that they will seek the same kind of help that they will see in our world. Therefore, we believe for the greater good, for the greater amount of people on our side.
Okay, on our side, by giving young people the greatest autonomy, the greatest level of autonomy to develop fully as well-rounded adults, which is uniquely done via like encouraging different types of social interaction and encouraging with people, encouraging socializing and interacting with people of all ages and of all beliefs and denominations, etc., and encouraging those, you get better preference forming and like better and like more well-rounded human development as a whole, right? We think, which is unique to our points. We think that like really quickly, first of all, we like directly clash with CG because of this like preference forming thing. We think that like what CG tell us about like engaging with like your preferences and like what you like, we think that you can never meaningfully do this when you are encouraged by these like trends and by what becomes like this social narrative and these social norms to do the opposite, right? You were encouraged to never engage with social, like in-person social events and like different types of socializing, and therefore when we get more autonomy to preference form and get like more fully developed ideas and values and preferences, which is important to like human development as a whole, right? So first of all, on like human development, we think that like youth culture looks a lot like as has been talked about in the debate so far, like clubbing, going out to bars, talking to people. In the top half of the debate, it was characterized as like engaging with like sports and in school and stuff. We think that like this probably falls out a little bit in that like most people fall out of sports after school and like university ends, and that we think that like this mostly looks like the social events that like young people engage with like of their own accord and like within their friend groups, which is like going out to like clubs and like pubs and stuff, right? What is this stay-at-home trend then? First of all, like it's a trend. A trend is like realistically it's a social narrative. It's pushed on you from all angles. It is all over social media. It is whatever you see via like social media algorithms, like touting what you engage with and like what people who are similar to you, similar age, etc. engage with, right? We think that like it is saying that like staying in is cool, going out is gross, like clean girl aesthetic, coastal grandmother, etc., etc. We think that like it is necessarily idolized and therefore doing the opposite is demonized, right? Therefore, like people going out, this necessarily then decreases the demand for people going out clubbing and going to bars and pubs and to these like purpose-built young people spaces. This looks like things that, like activities that were like massively popular like 20, 30 years ago, bowling, rollerblading, even like clubbing scenes in the majority of Europe are closing down because there is no demand for them. This is just like an economic principle and directly clashes with what CG told us about like clubs still existing. When like people aren't going to clubs and aren't spending money on drinks and like buying tickets into clubs will have to close, and they don't just like half close, right? The CEO also says that like the society has an incentive to provide alternative forms of young people entertainment. We think that like other than the like not giving us an incentive, the only incentive I can conceptualize is monetary and like making money, right? Therefore, when clubs close because there is less demand, young people literally have less opportunity and less space to communicate with each other and with like people from like of all ages. This has a couple of impacts, right? First of all, this decreases your engagement with young people from outside of like your bubble of like who you went to school with and like who you are directly in contact with, right? We think that like the encouraging of like real conversations necessarily makes you like question your beliefs and your values, and we think that like this goes one step further than what OO told you about like forming a meaningful relationships. We think that you do form meaningful relationships, but also you are encouraged to like question your own values and like and necessarily like interact with yourself and self-reflect on a deeper level, which encourages like communal community development as a whole, and encouraging different types of rhetorics, and then also within yourself. We think that like the overarching point of this is that like where real life communication where there is less in real life communication, you are forced via this like trend, stay at home trend, and the social media algorithms and echo chambers that you are forced into, and the confirmation bias that you get means that you never have the meaningful opportunity to preference form. We think that like harking back to OG for a second, they said that like this trend looks like you get like thriving online communities, you get like more TikTok trends like idolizing this, and you get like specifically like niche interest groups and niche interests engaging when it is like easier to find others to engage with that interest list. We think that like we can flip that analysis and just say that like you also probably then get far more easier like anti-feminist and like incel narratives, where but when by their own analysis they are easier to find because they are more popular, and by like social media algorithms like you are more likely to engage with the things that like other people around you are engaging with, right? We think that like you also just get less safe online spaces for people who have pre-existing like introverts and all these different types of people. When online spaces get overcrowding with these like growing different types of views, you get like a less safer space for these people to engage with, which like on either side they're going to engage in these online spaces anyway, right? So like preference forming them, we think that like in order for people to live a meaningful life, they need to be able to understand what they like and what they do not, and we think that we get this the best and to the most meaningful extent on our CO. This is how people express their autonomy and like making choices and like moving through the world in the most meaningful way to them, right? Which is an incredibly important thing to just like being a human. In order for people to be able to know what they like and what they don't like, they have to experience things, and we cannot know how we would react to an unknown. Very quickly, opening.
Yeah, when people are pressured to go out when they already have socially anxiety or like have bad experience, they're likely to experience more bad experience and just decrease their confidence. On OG, you can gradually build up your confidence online and then gradually like meet in person or later.
The thing is, like, we don't have to stand over it being mutually exclusive. Like, we can stand, like, social media exists. Like, these online communities do exist on our side. But, like, also people are, like, just do go out to clubs and go out with their friends when they want to, because they want to and they have formed that preference. On your side, you are actively discouraged from forming those preferences, right? And we will never know if we like clubbing or if we are extroverted or introverted if there is a narrative saying that we should all be introverts and we should all stay in and just communicate with our friends online, right? This means that, like, we can never know ourselves, and to the extent that where we can like meaningfully practice this autonomy, this weighs over our opening as well, because we are more unique to the motion in that like the info side states that you like avoid these experiences. They have just talked about like being online. We think that like through like uniqueness we get like we weigh where like we disprove the assumption as well that like external spaces still exist. We think that we can exist with both, only one is not vilified on our side over the other. For all these reasons, CO.
Okay, first of all, to clarify, what does this rising trend look like? Currently, we have a like very small trend, which has been growing, of staying at home as well. Whereas we have the majority of people doing like going out, going clubbing, doing whatever other extrovert experimental activities. We think what we have to defend on government in this debate is a rise of this trend, not a complete domination by this trend to stay at home, where everything else is kind of shamed away, but where it is at most 50-50, where like we have like two relatively strong trends. We think it's actually like more likely that it stays a, I don't know, like 30-70 or whatever thing. But even if it's like 50-50, this rising trend is not going to get stronger. This is not what we will see in the foreseeable future. This is not what this debate is about. But let's say this happens 50-50. Clubs can half close. Well, an individual club cannot really half close, but if we have 20 clubs in a city, then 10 can close, and we still have a clubbing scene. We still can go there if we want to go out, okay?
How do any of your impacts stand if people aren't actually buying into this narrative? Like, you need to prove that this narrative is prominent and people are buying into it, or else you've made the debate so marginal that nothing happens.
No, people are buying into it. Just not every single person follows it, right? So we have, let's even say we have 50% of people buying into it. Then we still have the other 50% that don't buy into it. Probably we have like a spectrum, and yeah. Okay. Actually, I think you are kind of, let's start with closing opposition, you're kind of contradicting yourself, because you say, oh yeah, we want like to go out, we don't want pressure, we want this like intergenerational, intercultural exchange and so on. But then you talk about how youth culture is quite concentrated in the status quo, in the like real world outgoing youth culture on things. So we think most of those impacts don't actually happen, whereas we actually do remove pressure, because we do remove the pressure of having only one trend, which says go out, go experiment, by giving a counter trend that kind of balances it out, where it is now a much more valid choice to just stay in and to explore other communities. Because what do you do if you stay in and are online? You explore niche interest communities, for example, which actually makes it much easier to explore your interests. And you have the same biases or TikTok trends or whatever you claim for staying at home. You already have them for going out. You have like people who post pictures from going clubbing, because this is like the cultural thing to do. And we think it's better if we at least have different things that are pushed. Okay. Okay.
So the 20% that you talk about, the people with social anxiety, are the kinds of people who, when they go online, see other people who like view society as something that has been mean to them, that presents them an unrealistic viewpoint. These are the most vulnerable people. How do you break down those conceptions to never
Okay.
go out and see what actually is
So we think, I mean, how do we break down this conceptualization? No, the trend breaks this down, and we think this is good, because it frames these activities that these people do as not something that the weirdos do in the corner or at home, but as something that just normal, that just people have a preference for, and that is kind of a normal thing. In this debate, we show you two things that bring us above opening government, which is first, we show you that the online space actually gets better by having more people in it. And secondly, we talk about why the right people actually change to the online space to fulfill their preference, making life better for people who are otherwise more pressured, and who are, and even for those who fall on kind of like the middle point where they may enjoy both things. I will talk about that a bit. Whereas opening mostly abstractly talks about why is the like online world kind of nice, but it's not quite clear why do we really need to have more people online, and why does the pressure not reduce. Okay. First of all, how does the online world look like? Well, first of all, we have kind of in both cases, in both worlds, a best case and a kind of worst case and some whatever in between. So I think in the real world, in like outgoing clubbing and casual sex are actually kind of the worst case, because you don't really get to know people. You kind of see people, meet them at their Instagram, see all those unrealistic pictures. And I think this is a bit similar to like some random, I don't know, gaming lobby where you just join for one game, get to know new people, don't really talk about deeper things. But actually, I think that, well, I mean, it's not quite clear. I guess offline, the best case is kind of hobby, I think. That it wasn't that clear in opposition. We think that actually special interest group, enthusiast groups, or like communities of, I don't know, minorities, for example, like LGBTQ plus communities, are actually much better. Because there you connect over a shared interest, you're really invested in the community because you want to keep talking about your shared interest, I don't know, your Game of Thrones fan theories, for example. And then you have like a community where you have like at least longer conversations. Yeah, maybe they're about a topic, but it's quite similar in the hobby as well, and you get to know people and you get to trust people, and you have long conversations. We actually think that structurally online and offline worlds are quite similar, because both have like bad, low effort things and both have like good possible things. Actually, one possible good thing is just meeting with people you know in real life, but online, and playing like board games online, for example. But the difference is that with a more even distribution between online and offline, we actually get a bigger online community, which means more niches can actually work. And it's less dominated by these weird like Andrew Tate type people you are afraid of ruining people's lives. No thanks. So what people actually do this? Well, on the spectrum from like introverted to extroverted, we first of all benefit the people who actually succumb to the pressure, but also the people who already go online because they now have a bigger and better and greater community. And secondly, the people who are kind of in between, well, they are much more likely to try out both worlds because they won't just do one thing or the other thing, but if the narratives are kind of evenly distributed, they will, I don't know, stay home for one weekend and then maybe once a month they go out clubbing or something, and then they kind of can explore their preferences. And these are exactly the people who should explore their preferences because right now they may be fine with going clubbing, but they may discover that they actually like I don't know, pen and paper RPGs much more. And then they can explore the online world. They're much more likely to do that in our case. But even if for these people it's just bad, it's still a short period of time where it doesn't really hurt them, and it's a huge benefit. Okay, I guess opening opposition. I think the unrealistic portrayal online and you're not being committed is something that is quite symmetric if you take a look at the worst cases and symmetric if you look at the best cases. Going out moderates the worst of the internet. Well, we've already said you can moderate that somewhere else, but also good places are easier to find if there are more people that are online and that work well, and we reduce peer pressure. Okay. Sorry.
Scooch this. Okay, hopefully I didn't ruin everything there. Panel, oftentimes your first time in a club is somewhat scary. Sometimes the first time that you go on a zip line is also scary. But this motion asks us to contend with whether or not people should actively seek out experiences that they haven't already had. And we think this is the only way that people can actually form preferences in their life. It's the only way that people can know what they like and what they do not like, because you cannot know an unknown. You cannot know the type of people you like if you've never met those type of people. You cannot know what experiences you like if you've closed yourself off artificially to a number of experiences that you otherwise would have experienced in life. Notably, this is prior to everything that has come in the debate before. Every team has relied to some degree on people being able to experience their preferences in a certain way. If you cannot know your preferences properly, then you cannot experience those preferences. So you cannot know whether or not you're introverted or extroverted. You cannot know the type of people that you want to form deep and meaningful relationships as OO wants to form if you cannot know what your preferences are to begin with. We were the only people who explained to you why seeking out experiences is uniquely important for people, and this is why we win the debate. Okay, so why then do we firstly weigh over OO, then I'll deal with CG and then CO. Okay, so we think we can weigh over OO because we actually proved that there's a trade-off. Like we prove that the type of experiences that the counter narrative, the type of experiences that are encompassed in that, such as like going to the club or like going on a zip liner or like even casual sex, necessarily require a critical mass. When you like lessen the number of people, even if it is by the 20% that the last speaker tried to tell us, these things often have very fine margins. Like clubs operate on incredibly fine margins, which means that if there's a 20% reduction, it's likely that clubs close. This means that necessarily you like shut off a significant degree of you shut off the people's ability to actually opt out of this stay-at-home narrative. When you close off the public space, when you close off experiences that people otherwise would be able to access, then they can never opt out of this stay-at-home narrative. This stay-at-home narrative becomes all-encompassing. That is a significantly higher restriction on people's autonomy than anything that SideGov has been able to bring us today. But like the same thing applies for like other experiences, because oftentimes you get experiences through commercial enterprises, which again operate on fine margins and require critical mass. But even things like casual sex, like you need casual sex to be a norm within society for you to feel comfortable opting into it and to feel comfortable like going up to somebody and approaching them. If you never get that critical mass, then you never then like people can never opt out of the stay-at-home narrative. They always have to stay at home. Okay, so because we prove a trade-off, we are like more comparative within the emotion. We also think we are prior to what OO have told us, because like you can't form the meaningful relationships that they talk about, or you can't increase your utility in the world unless you're able to know your preferences properly. Okay, what then does CG bring us? They bring us this case about like how this means people like can better allocate their actual interests because people don't opt into things that they actually don't like. The problem with that, like I wholeheartedly agree that there are some people who don't like clubs, like there are some people who are not suited to these type of environments. What they don't ever tell us though, is they never explained why the narrative of like going out and being outgoing is so overriding that people would actually disregard their personal safety and like opt into this. So we think there are people who don't like clubs, or there are people who are neurodivergent who like get sensory overload in those environments, but we think these things are significantly more proximate to these people, where they like actively don't like this environment, or where they actively feel unsafe. They're not likely to engage in these environments into the future. They say it's just not acceptable to do the alternative. I don't know what this looks like. What does it mean for it not to be acceptable, and why is that so important in my life that I would disregard my own personal safety or my own preferences? So we think what is important to people, but we do think what is important to people is that these people experience it in the first place, so that they know whether or not they like it, and so that they can form their preferences and make more informed decisions going into the future. Okay, and they also give us this push about like the online community, it possibly being like good, it possibly being bad. I think Ashton gives you enough analysis as to why there are like this the algorithm pushes you towards echo chambers, and there are also like opportunistic actors who are likely to capitalize on these vulnerable people, like i.e. Andrew Tate capitalizing on like vulnerable young men who feel disenfranchised, and therefore like exploiting that vulnerability, pushing them further to the right and exploiting them more. So like I don't know if the internet is good or bad really within this debate. I think it's probably bad, and I think that probably falls to us. So why then are we think that we can like take out the big push from CG, because I never actually know if they're able to reach their impact. I think people who really don't like this narrative in the way they tell us, really don't like going out in the way they tell us, probably just don't go out and probably just opt out of this. So yeah, and I think the only thing that they are reliant on like the bullying mechanism that OG brings us, and I'll take out the bullying mechanism and therefore take it over both teams. No thank you. Okay, so what's the problem with OG? Their scale is actually just unclear because of the concession that they make in their framing, and CG makes the same concession. They tell us that like school and work will push you to be outgoing regardless. At this point then, I don't know if I get bullied the whole day in school or work for being shy, I don't know why this minor shift about how you can spend your free time is so meaningful for people. I think if I'm bullied throughout school for not being outgoing enough, I probably can't spend my free time in a particularly meaningful way, because it's quite distressing to be bullied for the whole day. If there are factors that push you towards being outgoing in throughout like your life, then I don't think they ever get the shift that is necessary in the public domain for these people not to be bullied to the extent that they say they do. They tried to have their cake and eat it. Okay, so we think this means a couple things. At their absolute best, people just disregard this narrative of the... Oh yeah, sorry.
It is unclear why it is uniquely this trend instead of the general popularization of social media, or why it's going to be so strong that crowds out all other narratives that creates a significant enough economic delta for CO. Your impact is marginal.
So it's just a stay-at-home thing. Like we tell you, like you are the ones who are creating the trend in social media. That means less people are going to the club. That is what you stand over. That is your burden in the debate. Therefore, if you are contributing to the problem of clubs shutting down, you're the ones who never give people an opt-out of this narrative. Okay, so then we tell you, people are trying to have their cake and eat it. Either people buy into this motion, so it's enough of a critical mass and it drowns out the school thing, or like the people are still pushed towards being outgoing. They couldn't have their cake and eat it. Okay, so we tell you so then they also fail to explain to us why this is a preferable trend. Insofar as all trends and all narratives will restrict people's autonomy to some degree, they never tell us why if this comes to prominence, as is required for them to meet their burden for any of their impacts to stand within this debate, why this is a better narrative, like why this doesn't just do the opposite to people who are outgoing. So if they tell us that shy people in the status quo are currently ostracized and that outgoing people are glorified, if it then becomes the norm that like people who stay at home are like the go-to and outgoing people are ostracized, does that not just affect more people and ostracize more people because they concede that the shy people are the minority? So therefore, if it becomes the norm, you just do a harm to a bigger group of people. So we think we can actually flip it and weigh on scale against